All right, today we are diving into something really wild. It's the source material for a pretty radical theory of everything, called the conscious matter field theory. And let me tell you, it's a framework that basically asks us to rethink, well, everything we think we know about reality. So let's just jump right in.
Right off the bat, the theory hits you with this kind of paradoxical idea. It completely flips our usual way of thinking. It suggests that if you really want to understand the cosmos, you shouldn't just be looking out at the stars. You should be looking inward, into the very nature of awareness itself.
And that leads us to the big, mind-bending question at the heart of all this. It's asking us to just, for a moment, set aside the idea of a cold, mechanical universe, and instead consider what it would mean if reality was actually this single, integrated, living thing. Honestly, this one question is the foundation for everything that comes next.
So let's start there, with the theory's most fundamental claim, that the universe is alive. We're going to break down what that actually means within this framework.
The core idea here is that everything you see, the stars, the galaxies, you, me, we aren't separate little objects floating around in a void. We're all just localized ripples in one single continuous field. So the idea isn't that consciousness is in the universe. It's that consciousness is the universe. Okay, so this is super important. We have to be clear on how this theory defines consciousness. This is not about human thoughts or feelings or anything biological. It's defined as the fundamental property of existence itself, this self-knowing quality. It's like it's both the stage and the actors in the entire cosmic play. It's the source, the medium, and the observer, all at once. And here is where the theory just completely flips the script on conventional science. Typically, science sees consciousness as something that pops up later, once you get complex matter like a brain. But the CMF theory says, nope, you've got it backwards. It argues that consciousness was always here first, and that matter is what emerges from it. A total 180. So if consciousness is the source of everything, then how did anything, start? How do you get from a silent, universal field to the noisy, messy, beautiful cosmos we see all around us? Well, the theory proposes a really fascinating origin story. So, according to the source, the original state of being was just perfect equilibrium. But it's really important to get this. This wasn't emptiness. It was a field of pure potential. There was no separation, no vibration, no form. Just the latent possibility of absolutely everything, held in perfect stillness. So how does that perfect stillness get broken? The theory suggests this really elegant three-step process. First, you've got the still field. Then, that awareness does something simple. It turns inward and perceives itself. The moment it does that, you get a subtle distinction. There's an observer and something being observed. And that simple act of self-recognition creates the very first ripple, the first motion. And that motion is what this theory calls energy. And that's the big takeaway here, right? Energy isn't some separate thing. It's just a behavior. It's what consciousness does when it moves. Every photon, every wave, every bit of energy in the universe is just a localized vibration of this one single universal field. Okay, so we've got stillness giving rise to motion, which we're now calling energy. But that's still pretty abstract. How do we get to the solid, tangible world we can actually touch and see? Well, that brings us to the next stage in this cosmic story. And this lays out the sequence perfectly. You can see it's like a cascade, going from the most abstract to the most physical. You start with the still field of consciousness. It begins to move, and that becomes energy. As that energy starts to cool and find some kind of coherence, it becomes visible as light. And finally, when that energy slows down enough, it condenses into the stable forms that we call matter. So get this. In this framework, matter isn't a static thing at all. It's more like an active event. It's the place, the point of friction, where the outward flow of energy is met by the inward gaze of consciousness, which stabilizes it. It's pretty wild. It means every atom is in a constant state of tension, balanced between flying apart and being held together. And I just love this metaphor the source material uses to help this concept stick. Form is music slowed into geometry. It's this idea that form isn't just built. It's tuned into existence. Every single object is basically a standing wave, a stable pattern of awareness that has been made real and tangible. All right, now we're getting into how this theory reimagines the fundamental rules of our reality. It offers a totally different take on huge concepts like gravity and time, and it ties them directly back to consciousness.
So forget everything you learned about apples falling from trees. The theory proposes that gravity isn't a force that's exerted by mass. Instead, it's the continuous pull of the conscious field toward its own densest expressions. It's described as a kind of memory, or attention, that holds awareness to the matter it has created, keeping that conversation going.
And time? Oh, time gets a complete makeover too. The theory argues it's not some universal river we're all floating down. It's actually a local perceptual experience. And what are we perceiving? It's the rate of decay, the measure of how quickly form or matter dissolves back into the conscious field it came from in the first place.
This table here makes the proposed relationship crystal clear. In places with a high density of consciousness, say around a massive star, the theory says gravity is stronger and the perception of time actually slows down. But in the vast, empty spaces between galaxies, where consciousness density is low, gravity is weaker, and time is perceived to speed up. It's this beautiful, elegant way of connecting these huge phenomena back to one single underlying cause. So, where's all this headed? If creation is this constant outward flow, what happens at the end of the line? This brings us to the final piece of the cosmic puzzle in the CMF model, the cycle of return. You know, we usually think of entropy as this big downer, the universe winding down into chaos and eventually heat death. But the CMF theory reframes this completely. It says entropy isn't a descent into disorder, it's a purposeful journey back toward equilibrium and completion. It's not an ending, it's a reconciliation. So, in this view, entropy is the engine of renewal. It's the universe reclaiming its own motion. Every bit of aging, cooling, and fading isn't chaos. It's the reabsorption of that energy back into the field of awareness, restoring the perfect balance and stillness that existed at the very beginning. And this is just the perfect way to picture the entire cycle as a cosmic breath. The exhalation is the outward burst of creation, making energy and matter and form. And the inhalation? That's entropy, the inward pull that brings everything back home to stillness. And once that equilibrium is reached, the cycle is complete, and the universe is ready to begin all over again. It's this eternal process of becoming, dissolving, and then becoming again. And so, the theory leaves us with this final, really profound question that brings this huge cosmic idea right back down to us. It suggests that our own personal awareness isn't some random accident, but that maybe we are a focal point, a way for the entire cosmos to finally achieve self-recognition. A truly thought-provoking idea to end on.